Welcome to another Mish-Mashing Battle Lounge with the 2MK team. We are once again having Mish-Mashing. And that means we are looking through the current existing lounges to find out who we can face today that will help us work on problems. We're dispersing from the group we had before in terms of creating our usual lounge. You should be able to find us if you're paying attention to stream. We may inform through even stream chat what other members of the team ended up looking for. But you're going to get your analysis based on whichever side this stream is following, which means that first you're going to be watching Kanzuki Dynasty versus whoever we pick to face off with in that regard. We are, of course, I believe this is another 10 Battle Lounge matches week, which means a higher chance of high level players allowing you to stay, but as we've discussed before, we don't actually aim that high. It's relatively obvious after enough effort what you can handle and what players will be able to do against you and what you will be able to do against them. So today we're not aiming at the level of platinum, and we're definitely not going too high, but sometimes it helps to check it out. Let's go. But we do not tend to generally join things that are looking for casual players. So it looks like we've got very few choices in that regard right now. This is also likely to more likely at this time. It does feel as if players during this period tend to make lounges, higher level players make lounges, and just accept more lower level players. So sometimes that is the thing you do. You're looking for a way to get both your wins and some practice, and maybe to just give people a chance to fight you. So that is the trade-off. It's often true that you don't really get as much of a choice in the matter. Someone is actually offering to fight you, but they are tending to be really high level, and this works out because all of the mid-level people immediately go, oh, I can just wait for someone higher level to make a lounge and then join that, which is honestly often true. But for today, therefore, we're going to try to pick from these, and it doesn't look like there's anything in the gold range at the moment. So let's look for something either platinum or sometimes serious match from basically any level. It doesn't really matter. If you've ever wanted people to just join your lounge and assume you were good, oh, there we go. We can at least try that one. Put serious match on it. They'll know that you're at least going to give it your best. You're not going to mess around or necessarily try to mess with them.
Let's do this.
So let's see what we've got.
Round one. Fight!
This is of course also a good time to make a regular style lounge. So you may in fact find that some of our team members have made their own lounges rather than searching for higher level ones, because you can just make lounges and put seeking someone stronger than me, and you know, higher level players are also going to be looking out there and they'll show up. But in this case we got a little luck because we got to see apparently a platinum Karin
wins.
In platinum, yes. Now this could potentially lead to a Karin mirror, but it's more likely that it's not going to. In fact, I'd expect that the battle lounge is going to get messed up. Yeah, there we go. You can learn a lot about human behavior and, in a way, spend some time contemplating the thoughts that go with it, based on just that, really. Remember that fighting games are psychological enough that understanding how people think as a generality can in fact just make you better at them without you playing directly, if your problem isn't, for example, execution. Knowing which of those things is true and not true is very difficult, but of course if you are the type that has problems making decisions against opponents, then that's probably a good thing for you to work on at least some of the time. We have blocking and primal fire from our Gill. And Kanzuki Dynasty has some fairly detailed ideas of how to fight Gill, even if she doesn't necessarily have direct notes in every form.
That is the truth of what you must seek.
I'll show you the divide in our
Mostly this is about using like Rasenha at the correct timings instead of Maokin. There's a lot of good spaces for like Rasenha. Even when the Gill player is this high level and actually understands what they're doing, you still get to add a certain amount of stress to them by using it. Because it does, at least under certain timings, avoid a certain specific form of footsies. There you go, for example. And while Gill might be expecting it after a while, ready to punish it, if you have that concept in mind, if you know, well, Gill is now expecting me to light Rasenha, which means he's going to defend and wait for the light Rasenha, it means you get to play a lot more calm game. You're not really figuring that certain things will happen. So it's actually a fairly heavy key here. Eventually the Gill player should start hitting more buttons for you to whiff punish, just because you're willing to do it. And this involves things like the offensive V reversal, and understanding things like that, because they can't just start throwing other fireballs either, as you've just seen. They'll just get a different Rasenha. So you can see it's fairly easy to control this until the player decides to get serious. We're going to eventually see that, I'm sure of it. But the level of seriousness required here is kind of high, actually. You can't just mess with people unless you've got a lot of strong Gill combos, of really strong taking you apart sort of thing. The hard part here will be managing to not use the V trigger, because there are quite a lot of situations in which Kanzuki Dynasty does cancel into this, and it's entirely possible in the situation she was just in to go from I have almost full control of this match, life lead, everything, to, oh, I use my V-trigger and I can't parry out of this, therefore Gill is going to destroy me now. Because he can do it. She is 900 health character, she has good defense, but only when she has enough meter and a good read on the opponent. This whole thing is a lot about mental space and understanding. But she's definitely demonstrating it today. Notes always help. And as you can see, the spacing that Gill wants to stand at isn't the easiest for punishing light Rasenha in the first place. It gets you under his jumps, it causes him a lot of problems. As a whole, it's a very powerful move against Gill. If you don't just go, oh, you mean that Gill gets hit by light Rasenha? Cool. That's not the point. The point is to make him not want to do other things so that the light Rasenha is basically more of a way to get Gill to behave the way you want. And you simply don't take enough damage for most of his preemptive, proactive ways of stopping it to make a difference.
Round 2. Fight.
If you find this concept as a risky one, that's because it is, but honestly, you have to understand that's part of the game too. The top players in the world, most of them will tell you this. In fact, I believe that Tokido specifically made this comment a little while back. If you don't have to take risks to win the game at the highest level, it's not that great or interesting a game in his opinion personally. If you can just win the game by playing completely quote-unquote normally and just never make any mistakes, not really sure. So I expect this player to either stop or change character. Them changing character would probably be a good lesson for Kanzuki Dynasty's side, because this is a specific type of what we call bad matchups. We don't generally have concepts of bad matchups in this game. Terrible, like this character doesn't win this way. It's more so, how many risks does character A have to take to unnerve the player of character B? And how much of it can just be done by doing the things that character A normally does. In this case, specifically, this is a bad matchup for Gill, if you use that definition only. Because, I wonder if they would have wanted... Then again, people pick training stage too much, so maybe it's probably fine. Here we go, this is what we quote-unquote wanted. And this is going to be a learning experience of a particular type, because the Karin mirror is exactly this. All mirror matches functionally come down to this, but these are particularly bad because mirror matches involve more so the skill of the player. Whoever has more things that the other person can't stop wins. But she's also played the Karin mirror a lot in terms of the bot. The question is, emotionally, can she handle this? Because emotionally, the Karin mirror is hard, really hard on the lower level player. You just automatically assume the other player knows better than you. And this means they'll take more risks because they feel more comfortable taking risks than you do. They often have better damage output, but in this case not by a ton. Karin's a hard character to just, oh, I automatically have better damage output. But you can already see the difference. One of the main things that comes up is it's hard for a Karin player on the defensive to understand how everyone else has to fight Karin. They're more so thinking about how to beat those things. But there are absolutely ways to do this to not get demolished at this level. The question is, can you remember them based on other things? And that is more so a question of how quote-unquote self-centered you are as a person. If you understand how other people are supposed to beat your character, and if you've ever spent any time teaching other people how to beat your character, you're more likely to be able to stand up to other people in the mirror match. Kanzuki Dynasty has not spent a lot of time teaching other people to beat Karin.
Round 1.
Which means the only thing she gets is the minor shortcut I can now offer. Karin does not manage well when you neutral jump. But this is not going to help her a lot because her instincts are, okay, I did this thing to stop you, now I get my turn. Because that's not what the neutral jump is for. The neutral jump is there to stop the Karin player from bullying you in neutral, so that you can do stuff like that. So that she doesn't hit buttons and control enough space between you to remove your options. Then you have to decide, what do I do when I have my options back? Because you can't not defend, as just demonstrated. The opponent will jump forward because at the right spacing, you beat neutral jumps with Karin's forward jumping medium kick. And not every character has this problem with Karin. But this is a movement question now. And obviously you're still in the stage where you're being intimidated because your opponent's movement is likely to be better than yours. You can actually see what we normally would consider desperation. It's not a necessary form of it though. because there is a simpler solution to this. It's just not one that fits in with the rest of her style, so there's no point in me mentioning it while the match is going on. But you can definitely see what I'm talking about. There's a space here where it's like I don't know what to do, so I'm getting hit by stuff because I'm doing more things. So we'll see what this player does now that they have completely proved their dominance. Maybe they'll feel better.
You lose.
But the answer to the question is actually to use Seppo and Tenko and Orochi specifically to phase through Karin moves, which is in itself a risk. If you get hit doing it, you don't get to do much. If they defend, you don't get to do much. The concept is you must walk forward and see if you can walk them down somewhat. If you can't walk them down, the situation shifts. So, it becomes a matter of understanding what space you want to occupy and how much of it from your opponent you want to take. If you go, well, I have to do something so I can hit them, they'll Mayoken you. And if you say, well, I'm standing here so I don't have to worry about that, and you neutral jump and go, okay, they didn't do anything, and you try to attack, you'll get hit. If you backdash, you've given up your space. There's only one real answer, and that is to take relatively large risks that get you beat up, and have to get better and better at taking those risks. There's also like some very, very specific spacing and with punishes with hitting stand medium punch that may work, but this relies on the other player not being willing to hit sweep, because Karin's sweep does not generally easily punish her own sweep if you have the proper knockback. The neutral jump also doesn't beat the sweep. Like Rasenha and Seppo and Tenko all don't beat the sweep. Functionally, if the Karin player is willing to hit sweep just as a general thing, and they can manage to do it before you get too close, because if you get too close you can punish it. If they manage to hit it at the right spacing because you hesitate at all, then there's a problem. This actually leads to the very complex way of winning that match that most people will not understand. In the Karin mirror, you can move to a position where there is nothing the opposing Karin can do. Jump forward because her anti-airs don't have good forward range. Land within her range, where if she sweeps she'll get punished. You could hit stand medium punch, she could hit stand heavy kick, but then she's -4 and you might be able to get something into footsies on your terms, etc. There's a lot of this that comes up between footsie characters. In fact, it's something we talk about a lot relative to the Dalsim matchup. Retreat first, and then find a way to jump into the space that they won't be able to properly defend from. Now, this is absolutely counterable, because once you've got it to that spot, the opponent has no reason to focus on anything other than your jump timing. You can easily just go, okay, I'm jumping forward. And they go, sure, fine, I'm going to dash into position and hit you. Which means you have to be able to do something that is really hard to train at first. The opponent must dash at the height of your jump. The opponent must dash and be ready to anti-air you at the height of your jump or slightly before it. If you are able to react to Karin's dash with a attack button from the air, depending on their timing, you may get a jump in combo. We've had to develop this because at the mid-level you're much more likely to see the Karin mirror than at high level. In fact, if you've watched a lot of CPT and high-level Karin matches, people hate fighting the Karin mirror. It feels like chaos, and depending on the player's style of Karin, you can almost always predict who's going to win long before the actual match goes off, assuming no one drops any combos, simply because one player will be so much more comfortable doing the required things than the other. Will we get the Karin mirror again? I really don't know. I hope we do, but in a way it might not matter right now. This sort of thing isn't something you can build up easily, and it wouldn't necessarily come up as It's more so something you train on the bot. Not necessarily because the bot is one that will teach you how to do this well, but because most players don't like the Korean mirror, so you're not going to get a whole ton out of it.
Final round. Fight.
Has this been a full round? The first one timed out, so it's probably fairly slow. We've discussed the bits of this matchup before. But even as the analyst, the truth is I would be recreating the data from scratch, because I don't actually have the notes with me. Normally this is done by me referencing old notes, referencing what other players have done, what higher level players have said to make the notes, and sometimes it's just my quote-unquote innate understanding of hitboxes and hurtboxes that tends to lead this sort of thing. But in this case, because these two characters have such weird interactions in so many places, I was more so prepared for it last time than I am for it this time, meaning that you'd have to find some old stream where we actually discussed this matchup, or I would have to track down the notes, which were not available here because, I mean, why would Kanzuki Dynasty have Urien versus Nikali notes? So I'm not going to go scrounge those up right now, since I have no idea if this matchup is going to repeat, even if these two players do stay in the same space.
Urien wins.
I don't think I've ever seen the video quote, and due to Capcom's stellar UI design, I still haven't.
Round one. Fight.
What we are seeing here is consistently strong usage of Nikali's tools. Even though they were not finally triumphant in the past, it's definitely a thing you can see flowing well here. And in case you need the actual point, if this is what you're watching, you can probably go back to a video or 2 videos ago. I believe it would have been a Urien versus Nikali match in the last stream where we did discuss it. So if you do want some reference, it's probably toward the latter end of that stream. If you're watching on YouTube, just go back to the last Mish-Mashing or Mix and Mash Lounge with the date preceding this one, probably assuming all our sorting algorithms are working. And you should be able to find some data there. But watching it now, I can say that the way that the Nikali player is playing, I expect the Urien player's problems to increase slowly. Because we're already seeing the backdash, that is one thing that I might have mentioned. We're already seeing the spacings related to getting around Urien normals, and we did see earlier some of the absolute max range jumping heavy punch options. So there's a lot of calm here. But you can definitely see the backdash playing into it, because Urien has to keep up with Nikali's spacing, primarily by walking forward, which means he loses access to all his charge moves. And Nikali is so good at keeping that space. Yeah, there we go. It still technically worked out. That he doesn't care. He has a whole stage behind him to use. And we're seeing some very zoning Nikali here. It's like, okay, I've got all this space. And then eventually he will just come forward and give you more stress. He doesn't have to do anything. Technically he's already won by timeout. This would be even easier with using the other V-trigger. Sorry, V-skill, but it would also require some serious focus. This can, for example, be won with just like perfectly spaced EX. Stomp, for example. Ah, that would have been a good one, except for the fact that if you wanted to do that, you had to land and do uppercut or something. And our Urien player was a little too ready for that. So, this is a heavy punch, but combo dropped. Obviously, I would assume that these are not nice main characters, because they have all the fundamentals of how to play the Kali, all the fundamentals of how to play Gill, but not all of the skills to beat the counters yet. That's what it looks like so far. It could just be that they weren't expecting stiff competition in this particular way. But that is a lot of what you spend your time doing in games like this. What you level up is how to respond when your opponent knows the counters, when they know the matchup. Because a lot of that stuff has to be trained physically as well. Good micro walk on that one. And Urien doing Urien things. At this point I still wouldn't be all that worried. They could activate the V-trigger, they have enough of your reversals to get Urien off them. The main thing against them here is time, actually. And it looks like some lag is coming in, because we're seeing it from this side, so it can't be all that great for them. But their super... The problem is that Nikali only has so much time for this. Timer scams don't work on that. So, in the end, victory goes to Urien. So we'll see what happens with this lounge. Possibly pull in another team member depending on who does things. Okay, that was, I'm kicking you out because I don't want to lose that person anymore, or something, let's say, because normally the lounge will not disband in that case. So I guess we're not going back there. I hope they get through whatever it is and feel better about their day. Some people get really discouraged, and that a discouragement can come out as some fairly negative emotions. Remember that it's not always that the person is specifically mad at you. Most of those people at higher levels manage to keep themselves, let's say, quiet. They don't specifically say things to you. Looking for players from bronze to super bronze. Let's go! It's not quite what you wanted, but this is like the definition of it. But they've probably already gotten their bronze to super bronze. I hope they pull back at least a little bit, because it's kind of... well, whatever. Gold to super platinum... They'd probably accept, but we don't know yet. Let's see what we got other than that. As you just saw for a moment, I believe, DeWolf is actually currently hosting a lounge. We're not necessarily joining it, but there are 5 people in it, so maybe we should. Let's go see what they have to do. This is a seeking someone stronger than me, so you can get to see the other side of the same response. Did high-level people join this one? Or did we just end up with the usual suspects? It looks like we got some 2 goals, usual suspects otherwise. So we can have something akin to our usual, having had our start off for about 30 minutes of new experiences from Kanzuki Dynasty side. Level 57 Ken using VS1 and VS Trigger 1. 37 for Ed, also 1 and 1. These look to be their main characters as well. I didn't even check whether or not this was characters let off, but let's see what they have to show for themselves. We've often discussed the standard styles of play for these characters. Oh good, it wasn't that long that we had started this. So, the first thing we generally check with Ed players, do you play footsies or not? Our general assumption that Ed players will either play really good footsies, like phenomenally good footsies, or none. And this has not been broken as yet. We have not found an Ed player yet. They're not super popular, but we've not found an Ed player yet that breaks this mold. Someone who like switches depending on the context. You can't count like them hitting their pressure strings like this. The question is, once the pressure string has ended, do they walk ever? This is close to what you might think of as Ed playing footsies, but these aren't Ed's footsie buttons actually. These are Ed's, okay, if you hit something and you happened to hit something that I countered, then I get good stuff buttons. Ed's footsie buttons, the best way to tell is that if the Ed is never hitting medium kick in neutral, it's probably not footsies. It doesn't matter if it's crouching medium kick or standing medium kick. If you don't see medium kicks as a generality, don't assume that the Ed has any intention of playing footsies. They're just hitting buttons in the hopes that you are playing footsies, which are entirely different things. The problem is that Ed players really struggle when they face an opponent with enough awareness of this and don't know how to play footsies. There's a medium kick. Have we finally found the legendary Ed? But that might have been an attempt at a crouching medium kick that they failed the execution of, so you don't know actually. There's a jump. But this is the sort of thing I mean. It's very easy to tell from the Ken player's side. I can already tell you that this is what they're looking for. Because they're on point with every there's the first anti-air that they failed, and that was probably because it was the cross-up that gets ambiguous enough anyway that you probably shouldn't try. All of this is happening very fast mentally. Trust me. But they are so prepared for the Ed player to jump that they are making plans based on the Ed player jumping, which is important. Like that. They're completely convinced that their opponent will jump because Ed players don't play footsies. But still, they're at the point where we see a little bit of things. We see a couple indications that, hey, I might hit something other than these buttons that I hope you will get beat up by. I'm not sure it's going to be enough, but you can definitely see they're trying to. It could just be that they're working it into their game plan, for example. But it's going to be hard to keep up with Tamada, is it? It looks like Tamada. Yeah, Tamada or Tamada, I can't see from here very well, because I'm sitting way too far from the screen, by the way. Oh, that was probably meant to be a crosscut DP that failed. Or their walk under failed at the last moment. But even when the Ken player at the moment fails, you still see the same principles behind their playstyle. They expect to be kicked at in that space, they expect the jump, they expect to be able to move in and out of range. This is exactly the sort of thing that leads to the whole Ken as the quintessential all-American martial artist and why he wins. They're being a good demonstration of Ken now. Because as much as Ken is absolutely a character, as a person who will be cocky and take on people, Ken is usually being very serious. He's looking at the weaknesses of other people and deciding how to dismantle them. And I think it already showed that the Ed player has already left. Which is unfortunate because, honestly, as much as it might not seem that way, they were doing quite well. It's just that the Ken player is something else. But are they going as well? Can't tell. Yes, they are, which means we can head out from here too. We got to look at that, but watching the team fight, especially in this scenario, is not the aim of this stream. So we'll be back when we hear from them that we have gotten any other serious joiners. For now, we move back to hunting outside. Unfortunately, the connection isn't as good. We've had some weird weather today. It's no secret that we live in the New England area and generally are streaming from their US East Coast and all that. I see what... Do we remember this person? I generally try really hard to remember people by whether or not they're tolerant or intolerant of different styles of play or different people in their lounge. You know, just if they're the type of person who gets salty or doesn't want to quote-unquote waste their time on lower level players, or some combination of the two things, which leads to if you just don't get to fight them without enough rank points. If you're too high in rank points, they don't want to fight you because they came for a normal challenge. If you're too low though, you have two options. Either you aren't good enough at stopping their pressure or whatever and they don't think you're worth their time.
Round one.
Even if you brought it fairly close, often that's the response you get. And if you are too good at it, they get upset with the fact that you won for some reason. It could be lots of reasons. That's generally what we encounter, but I don't seem to remember that particular aspect from this player, if I am even remembering the right person by name. So I guess we'll try.
Final round. Fight. Round one. Fight.
Alright then, back to slower movement. And we still have a Urien functionally. Person plays both Urien and Bison, which is not uncommon. Although it is actually harder than you'd think it is, because the two don't actually fight all that similarly. They have to use their meter differently at different times, and they have different options on wake up. Of course, since you can't immediately tell which of the two characters they're more aligned to, you won't necessarily know what their direct plans are. Okay, but I can to an extent tell. Because reasons. And I can tell you that this person's main is the Bison. They probably spend a lot of time on their Urien, but I think it would be fair to say that this is a Bison player with a Urien secondary rather than the opposite. If we ever run into them anywhere, we'll have them correct my assumptions. But there are lots of little clues in here for those of you who really like getting into my head and understanding all the stuff I'm saying. One good clue is opponent jumps at you while you are on the ground with meter and you didn't wake up with an EX move. Because Urien can mess up things if he EX headbutts against the jump too early, and therefore it's easier to just dodge some of them. Whereas Bison gets a lot of free get outs if he does EX head stomp in reaction to the opponent jumping at close range.
Final round. Fight.
Similarly, if you see them do it in response to the neutral jump as they did just now, similar concept of, oh, if I were playing Bison I would have resolved this with that. Bison players will generally wake up with the EX to the neutral jump, but need to do a bit more thinking about distance and so on if the opponent jumped from mid-screen or similar, where the default is maybe, but let me stay down. But they have different responses. They'll understand the spaces that they are doing this at in order to get out of things. So I'd say, based on that, I'm going to guess Bison is their primary. Of course, you can't just decide someone's primary based on, oh hey, you're doing this thing, but you're also lacking some information because of the way that footsie is being played. Specifically, that I'm not seeing a bunch of medium punches. Uriens aren't so great, honestly, but He has some good ones. He has some good timings and spaces for his medium punch, but they're meaningfully different than Bison's own. And knowing they're so different might lead to a player deciding, okay, I don't hit medium punch on Urien because I can't hit it the same way I hit it on Bison. It'd be easier to not do that. But you know, just to pass time while they're fighting, I give you all this information. It's a little laggy, but again, lots of things are to it.
Round 2. Fight.
It is a good demonstration of how tiny aspects of your game are lost or removed when playing as a secondary or a character that might not suit you as well. I'm not saying that they're less suited, simply that this is probably their secondary in some form. But it is becoming laggy-er, so we're not necessarily going to be able to have a good match with either player. The question is really whose side is laggy. And there's no way to know that right off, but I think that the way that Street Fighter handles this mostly is that Battle Lounge host data is the primary.
Final round. Fight.
One of their better odds here would be to do stuff like that, yes, actually. To abuse things like doing Urien's Violence Knee from too far away. Which would mimic the occasional distraction and style you can get by moving inward against most opponents using Devil Reverse, but without the specific intention for the Devil Reverse to hit anything. It would only check an opponent who was approaching. But it looks like this is probably not a lounge worth staying in the sense that it is likely that this lag is bidirectional enough, or it's entirely on our end, which would be really bad. So we're going to look when the match comes up, see what the connections look like, and decide if to stick around, rather than subject anyone to anything. But it looks more so like the problem was with... okay, yeah. It looks more so like the problem was actually on the Mika's side, so maybe let's give it a try. They're certainly willing to go for it, and we already actually see it demonstrated, at least by their character choice, that Bison is possibly their main. I didn't pay attention to the level of the Urien. And we don't know who they're going to pick, as obviously it's an option.
Karin, Kanzuki, M. Bison.
But alright then, let's go with what is presumed main, even if we're only looking at how the fight is done from mental space. As we've often mentioned, the way that the team trains means that we don't spend a lot of time fighting each other, mostly because we have such weird, relative to the Fu strategy, ways of playing our characters that we've developed over time, that it doesn't make a lot of sense to learn how to fight Bisons in general by fighting just Vine, for example. But I'm going to be looking out for the similarities here, if any. It's already none. We can already say with almost certainty that aside from like a very specific aspect of how to play footsies, any advantage she would have gotten by understanding how to fight just fine is meaningless. So one of the main things Karin players need to understand about how to deal with grounded Bison is the fact that he needs to be re-reversaled off you a lot. Like a lot. This is because most of Bison's pressure is extremely re-reversible and doesn't lead to any tick setups. He has those on knockdown, but not in neutral. And Karin can absolutely handle playing neutral with Bison. She doesn't take a lot of damage there, but that moment, much harder to deal with. And the reason you want to deal with it so much is because you want to give Bison as little options for meter and knockdowns as possible. Otherwise you get steamrolled. And Karin has such a good view reversal for removing that option from Bison, for taking back the mid-range game and doing this, that she really should just use it all the time, like consistently just knock him off you. He's not a character that has the option of going, oh well, I'm gonna bait you out of this, because he has specific moves that you re-reversal. He has specific sequences that you re-reversal. He cannot throw you during those sequences. So if he wants to keep up pressure, he has to either not hurt you enough for the re-reversal to come up, or be so relentless that you get back into the bad situation even though you've just managed to re-reversal him off. And at that point, that's on you. The Bison player effectively deserves to win at that point because you managed to knock them off you, but couldn't use it for anything. One good option for dealing with this, therefore, is figuring out how to get enough V-meter to do anything. For Karin, this is fairly easy. She just has to find the right moment to do sweep. Bison doesn't super hard punish her sweep, so it's not that big a deal. He can whiff punish it, but those things were going to happen in mostly the same timings anyway. A little underwatery. But due to the way that the ping has been changed, it's not necessarily... It's more of a stress point in the match than a I can't fight this matchup because of it. Oh, there's a good one. The V skill is not something that matters to Karin a lot in that regard either, so it's not likely to come up. Bison doesn't get a lot of damage off of this. So between the usage of the V reversal and the... when she does get the meter, enough of it to use for uppercut, basically, for ES or Senha, there's some good ways to control Bison's movement here. It's a matter of creating enough scrambles.
You lose.
Still, between the lag and the fact that this is not the sort of matchup she manages easily, we're probably not hanging around this time. This is more so something that has to be learned on a different time scale. Because, again, the opponent has a different concept of this. Just Mine would have eventually stopped doing that because it would have been much more of a, okay, I'm going to get countered for this. Or I would get countered for this if my opponent was better, so not doing that either. And they said they wanted gold to super platinum, so let's not spend a lot of time taking up theirs. Especially since they have just gotten a new Akuma to fight. Ozymandias was another Bison, but they have like 4 people in there. Let's go see, is the wolf still up? Well, still visible rather than up, because the game does get a little weird about that. It looks at the moment to be a no. I'm not really sure if this person is specifically requesting beginners or saying beginners are welcome as a generality, but character select is off. Never mind, this is 3-bar Alex, which is basically... we'll see it, but it's probably unplayable. The fluctuation between 3 and 4 bars, the opponent being level 4, this does not mean anything once again because you don't level up from playing Battle Lounge matches. We don't know, therefore. And beginner's welcome is not a really... It's the sort of thing, if you were a beginner yourself and you didn't know how the UI worked, it's probably the first thing you would pick instead of specifically looking for, say, looking for opponents from rookie to bronze or whatever else. So either this is a complete beginner trying to get some XP in. I see from level 17 I'd sort of expect it. But you really can play this game without managing to get any character levels. and get a lot of games in, I think. When fighting an opponent that you have no idea if they know what they're doing or not, the best thing you can do for yourself and them is play the matchup. Even if they're not doing any of the things involved in the matchup, none of the things they're doing are technically correct by, oh, this is the correct way to play it. Because playing the matchup allows them to see the weaknesses of the character quickly. You don't have to overwhelm them by using all of your big combos if you're not sure. You can do that as you get closer and closer to losing the match, let's say. This is a common thing you actually see in higher level players. But higher level players sometimes do this to players who are not necessarily beginners. Just, it's helpful, it reminds you that, oh, you kind of need to learn to counter this if you want to beat this character. It's up to you how you want to respond to that. We normally advocate leaving when they, after having demonstrated it a couple of times and you've proven, hey, I can't stop that, just keep using it to beat you up. Because you're not going to learn it in that space of time. They might be not thinking about that, and it's not really that big a deal. Some people think about these things differently, but for your own purposes, general experience tells us that if someone is stressing you out and beating you up with that sort of thing in a match, they're also picking the more stressful or correct times to do it. They're not just trying this combo at every opportunity so that you can learn to counter it both before and after it. They're just doing stuff. For example, at this point, it's still actually impossible to tell if this is a beginner or not. Because, first of all, Kanzuki Dynasty has not at the moment pushed forward with heavy Karin counters to Alex. She's still playing very grounded. She's still not going for medium Rasenha, even though it would be possible against this player, possibly. And in a way it's good practice for her because she has to play Alex-based footsies against someone who isn't necessarily trying to do all of the other Alex stuff that can sometimes lure people into messing themselves up. The player hits buttons and she deals with the buttons. It could also be that this is an extremely high level player who is just not willing to do other Alex stuff. Maybe they're learning Alex through this. You never know, and it really doesn't matter. What she is lacking, however, that is a heavy part of the matchup, is the forward medium kick. And it is a big deal for the Alex player because their timing on moves could be good enough for it, but we would not know yet. Since the forward medium kick is meant to break a specific type of thing or force Alex to walk backward, it's not necessarily just the medium kick that's missing, but the mindset that goes with it. If I am not able to benefit from hitting the medium kick, you're walking backward, and you walking backward is a benefit to me. But that involves remembering why walking backward is a benefit. And it's not something that comes up in her matches very often, actually, because most Alex players avoid being pushed back to the corner. Karin has really good corner guard against Alex. She doesn't have to do anything, she just has to get the life lead and get him there, and for the most part he can't do anything much. But if she is attacking, then obviously he has counters. If he overly defends, or goes for the down back because she is able to reach him with the crouch medium kick at that point, then the forward medium kick comes into play. So it's all about a thought process from there. You want to hit the forward medium kick to prevent Alex from being able to get charge and to make him need to walk backwards. If he does walk backwards, you've achieved something that you wanted anyway. Now you can go for the low and you can corner guard him for a long time. In fact, we've specifically mentioned that Alex uses his EX moves just to prevent getting pushed back to the corner from Karin doing this. And from a lot of characters doing this, honestly. But there are other pieces. For example, knowing that the player you're facing is in fact so willing to walk backward that if you could get close enough to them, it would indicate that you should be able to hit with the crouch medium kick. It's another option in your arsenal.
You win.
Being able to keep these things in mind as entire mental states, entire game plans, and understandings of how things will flow is how you get to, let's say, platinum, because it depends on the character. Some people get to high gold, some people get high into platinum. There are a few characters that technically can't get out of high silver, low gold playing like this because the opponent's characters have different options. But we're looking at basically the same things here. We have an Alice who continues to defend their space, but regardless of whether or not they are high level or not, the interactions aren't going to change that much. Alex must either give up the option of using certain moves because the forward medium kick might come too quickly, or he has to at least mildly risk being hit by the crouch medium kick. His final option is to just move himself all the way to the corner and get corner guarded based on the perception that, hey, this particular Karin can't necessarily corner guard me enough. Wake up ES Power Bomb. And of course he can use meter and other options to get himself out of the space.
Round 2.
So rather than spending any time trying to decide whether or not this is a good player or not, you simply watch the matchup and the interactions. We know we're definitely seeing some speedy reactions. And that is another reason why this really comes up a lot in fighting games. You can't be sure if a player is an expert in a different fighting game, and this is their first foray into, let's say, Street Fighter. Depending on their mindset, they might be the person that goes, okay, I'm going to go fight in Battle Lounge for a little bit, why would I fight in Bronze, or why would I fight in low level? I might not learn as much. But that does not mean they're not going to whiff punish every button. Because they absolutely could.
You win. It's go time.
One ironic-ish aspect of this is that it can sometimes make things more difficult for the mid-level player. When you are uncertain of whether or not your opponent is doing things because it was a good idea or not, if it's just their style, and their style is a little bit, let's not say crazy, but a little bit crazier than you expected, because your concept of crazy is that these things are rational, and your opponent's concept of crazy is that a different set of things are rational. There's often some clash there. And this can stress you out enough to drop things like punishes or decisions, because you don't know for sure that your opponent isn't going to try something entirely strange, like flash chop into EX knee or something. You don't really know. And it's often true that the perfect set of skills for a character involves using just about everything you've got, even if some of them make no sense to regular people. Understanding the shape of your character, their hitboxes, every little interaction has a big amount of decision making behind it. Right now we are watching Karin versus Sakura, and something that is very akin to that. Our Sakura player isn't necessarily making all of the decisions you'd expect from a Sakura per se, but they're making decisions that are at least cohesive within their own game plan. Based on what I've seen in this one round, they have a very clear idea of how they want to play Sakura, whether or not that is conventional, logical, or by some standards good. Really depends on how well they execute some of it. And course, how stressful they can be to the opponent. The answer to beating this person, you'd see nearly any high-level player do it immediately, is just to dash and throw them a ton. But if you try to play regular play with them, I doubt it would work. Because their idea of when to inch forward, when to jump, and when to hit the crouch medium kick are all consistent. They hit the crouch medium kick in a defensive situation when they think you want to reposition for optimized positioning yourself, and they tend to wiggle before they throw their fireballs because they're trying to lure you into the fireball. They're not necessarily using it to proactively zone you. And since you don't know if they're going to throw it or not, you can't decide. It's also a good spacing for making sure you can't just dash up on them. So as a style, it's consistent. It might not be the best character to use it on, I can't say, and it might not be all that hard to counter, but consistency is still important. I would expect this style to lose fairly heavily to a Ken player, for example, because the Ken player would most likely throw a fireball at the same spacing. They would most likely jump in this space instead of trying to play footsies, and therefore would never get hit by the crouch medium kick. And they would run forward and possibly throw more often to counter the repositioning aspect, and of course those jumps would easily get uppercut because they're not playing Karin, who has issues with anti-airs. Meaning that it leads us to the floating concept. This player could have an entirely consistent style, a very clear idea of what they wanted to do, all sorts of specific skills, but be built entirely to lose to relatively normal Ken play, and spend a lot of time trying to adapt to the fact that they lose to that style of Ken play. A rough thing, because it's easy to go, well, this isn't working, I'll stop. But not working is very subjective in fighting games until you get to the upper levels. At the upper levels there's definitely this doesn't work, because your opponent dismantles the plan, overwhelms you with their own plan, or just counters it outright. Like, dismantling and countering are separate. Dismantling is when they never let you do it, and countering is, you can do it, I'm just gonna hit you every time.
Round one. Fight!
We already see a part of that beginning here. If Kanzuki Dynasty stays close enough to always block that crouch medium kick, she gets to maintain her own spacing and therefore gets to play footsies in the way she wants. Just this walking forward pressure style of thing. Which also means that the Sakura player is at a bad space for their own jump, without the jump getting anti-aired, even with Karin's anti-air options. This isn't to say that this is terribly strong in terms of dismantling them, as it doesn't lead to a lot of knockdowns or pressure, but it's not necessarily stressful or difficult to do it. Whether or not you end up low on health as a result of people hitting buttons at slightly staggered timings or your own understanding of things is up to your skills and whether or not you're playing a very defensive character or not. Certain high-level players in fact entirely use certain more offensive characters or more intimidating characters to get through pools, simply because having to do too much analysis on what your opponent wants to do in order to play against them is just stressful. In a way you could tire yourself out, especially if you expect to do really well in the tournament and need to get through like 13 people. You don't want to tire yourself out much on the first 3 or 4. Now, with bigger tournaments and heavier seeding, this often turns out to be 1 or 2. After that you don't really have to worry so much. You've already shifted to players who definitely have full plans that you probably understand because of whatever reason. But in this case, not so much.
You win!
So this is good practice in terms of looking at the opponents and not really needing to judge them by either their rank points, or specifically how many combos they know how to do, how much damage they can output, or whether or not they play the normal way. It's much harder to determine, is my opponent's game plan consistent enough that I have to think about how to deal with it, or are they doing random-ish things? So far, I've seen no indication that either of these players is doing anything random-ish, which means that Kanzuki Dynasty needs to stay on her toes for this. Especially since the lounge is created as character select off, we know that it's going to remain this way unless someone goes to the trouble of changing their character outside of this. So we're going to be seeing Alex versus Karin and Sakura versus Karin for a bit, probably. Let's therefore look at this from the perspective of the other player. What would it take to have even more consistency, or how do we apply their plans to the Karin matchup? What is missing, what can be added, etc. Our Alex player has a fairly good idea when they want to hit certain buttons and the ranges that they want to hit them at. One thing that they could add in is actually related to his head crush and similar. Their spacings and the spaces they push her to with their buttons work decently well for actually getting the light head crush in. Well, we've discussed before how necessary that that move you just see is. Alex's upswinging arm. And the fact that he really can just play footsies with Karin the entire day if he wants to, and people just try to do other things. That might have been intended to be a heavy or even ES powerbomb. That dash up timing seemed like it would have been that. And similarly, you could question, well, should we expect much out of this? If they do get pushed to the corner and corner guarded, it gets much harder. Obviously, there's nothing really to think about there. From the Alex player's perspective, therefore, are they learning much from that? It depends on whether or not they're making any mistakes in neutral. If they're not making mistakes in neutral, then the optimal thing you can do for them to teach them anything is to demonstrate, hey, if you let me get you to the corner, there's not as much you can do. You have to stop this somehow. But because you can't know the player's capability or mindset,
Round one.
it's best to keep on doing it for a bit and see what they choose to do about it. Because this is one of those things where they often have an option. You might not want to corner them too early because then they don't have enough resources to do anything. But, you know, there's 1 meter point here. And we immediately see them showing a point that indicates they understand what's going on. Air knee smash to get out of the situation is a decent option. Forward jumping when you're not sure that you're going to get caught by Karin is a way to learn whether or not you will. And we're definitely not seeing uses of meter like, oh, I'm just going to do something and hope it works. So, for the time being, we're just going to have to assume that the player is thinking about it. And as options go, that might seem desperate, but not really. There was a wiggle. A wiggle usually indicates shimmy. You just finish it or don't finish it. Take the chance.
Round two.
You have no health anyway, it's not like corner guard is going to matter. Even a trade will kill you. But, on the other side, if managed to be cornered again, now they've learned a lesson. Wait, I just used all my meter to get out of that one. Oh, now what? But, you can see their response is actually entirely different. I have to hit more buttons. I have to take more risks now. I have to not get cornered. Because if I get cornered, having used that super, I might die. So whether or not they're doing it instinctively, because they're actually a high level player offline on a different account, play a different game, none of that matters right now. The only thing that matters is, can you corner guard this Alex? And does it matter whether or not they functionally fully understood what's happening, or are just instinctively going, well, I can't be cornered, that would be bad, so let me get out of here. We can actually somewhat tell though, because they have enough meter to resolve the problem if they were being stressed out by it. But we're seeing the neutral jump versus Karin, for example. We're seeing pokes. We're seeing, I'm going to try to get myself out of here without doing too much so that I can this. So, we're seeing awareness. And if you think, oh well, this still doesn't prove to me that this Alex is good, I don't really know what to tell you, because I'm not really trying to prove that they're good. Only that they have a very, very clear understanding of what they want to do in this game. Whether or not they can physically do it, not really as relevant.
You lose.
Similarly, deciding, oh, this is the top Alex. This person is like hiding their true power behind their 0 LP. Doesn't tell you or give you anything either. Because if you play the matchup, that shouldn't matter to you. Especially not a person who you are not seeing use a bunch of Alex trickiness, super shenanigans, anything like that. None of that has been demonstrated so far. It might show up, but we definitely haven't seen it up to now. Therefore, you should play this almost as if it's a bot, but not necessarily because, oh, we don't think this person is good. Bots aren't meant to be not good. Bots are just not meant to hurt you a lot. Most of them. Which is exactly what we're looking at here. A person who is doing a lot of good Alex things, but doesn't have a massive amount of damage to back them up. This is in fact the most important opponent type you can face in any fighting game. Just for you learning more things about yourself. Because this is absolute purity. Here, it's not about neutral per se either. It's that you are losing based on decisions you're making. You can't say that it's anything else, because whatever it is that is happening is a matter of interactions based purely on full decisions being made. This player decided, I'm going to neutral jump twice on Karin with the expectation she's going to come in to try to get to me. I'm going to use Alice's jumping heavy kit to get some advantage here. Good. It doesn't really matter whether or not they're a quote-unquote good player or just did that completely out of instinct. The point is, you had to deal with it and you made a decision.
Final round. Fight.
Because this boils it down to, are you making the correct decisions or not? It also gives you enough time to think about things where you can decide whether or not the thing you chose to do was luck or not. Did you happen to not use a certain move this time that you usually would instinctively use? Or did you decide not to use it?
You win.
So in this case, Kanzuki Dynasty has emerged victorious again. Hopefully we'll get to keep on doing this for a bit longer. Stream will probably end a little later than usual because Mish-Mashing is usually like that. We will probably either consolidate up at the end so that you could join if you wanted to. You can probably still look for the wolf. There's likely still a lounge open somewhere even though we're not seeing it. And that lounge will almost certainly be 3 rounds first to 2. Which character select it is set to, I don't know right now. I'll check. But we are going to go back to talking about what we were talking about before. Consistency. Our Sakura's concept of consistency is known. I am going to defend myself with my crouch medium kick. This is a good option. It hits you when you walk backward. It pushes you out. I'm going to jump in ambiguous ways. I know the spacing for this. You walk into it. I'm going to throw fireballs when I wiggle. Karin's best option, just to beat this, if your only goal was to come up with a strategy to beat this, it would be to seppo. And the goal of the seppo would simply be to put herself into a space that the opponent most likely has not attacked fully yet. Like right here, that moment, they're definitely not in the crouch medium kick range, they've just gotten out of it. They're most likely not going to hit you when you do this. If they're waiting for the seppo, you've got other options that open up, and that's all you really need to understand. Since you don't need to try to walk into this player's range in the first place, you don't have to worry about it. Even if they're waiting for the seppo, your situation hasn't changed that much. Your goals also haven't changed that much. Mindset-wise, this player doesn't want people near them, and you're stressing them out by getting nearer. And then you get to learn something about them. When faced with the stress of someone who keeps on getting close on their terms, do they back off more? Do they hit more buttons? Or do they just say fuck it and move in and get closer themselves? And this is how we generally tell what type of player you're facing. Zoners tend to move away, frustration players look for the moment to counter your approach, and close in and pressure players, well, generally pressure players wouldn't have chosen this place down in the first place. Close in players can though, they can choose to be away until you give them the chance to get in. And then they'll go, okay, well I'm coming in then, since you're not going to let me do it the other way. But I don't expect this is a close in player because if they were, they would have jumped more by now. So, psychologically, seppo is the answer. Because it makes the opponent behave differently. But this is no use to you if you can't take that information about their different behavior and make a new plan out of it. And this is one of your biggest problems, one of people's biggest problems with fighting games. If someone gives you advice and tells you, oh, you can counter this by doing that, they're expecting you to fill in the rest of the blanks. They expect that on the other side of your current mental block is an entirely new plan, so they give you the way out of the block. And there's a good example of that being done perfectly. If the seppo, if the player is a frustration player and you expect them to start watching for the seppo, what they will end up doing is walking backward more in hopes you will eventually do the seppo, which means you get to corner them. In fact, recognizing that you're facing that sort of player means you never actually have to do the seppo, you just walk them to the entire way to the corner again. It's a little bit slow, sometimes a little bit boring by some people's standards, but in terms of understanding your opponent and how to deal with them, that's the correct answer. You want to catch me doing something, but you have to give up space to reposition so that you can catch me. And eventually you're gonna run out of space. Or resources. In certain cases it's resources. that finally brings us to the exact aim of Kanzuki Dynasty's play today. Learning when to not go in, when to not push harder. Because recognizing that you can walk someone down is only helpful if you don't actually give in to your instinct to try to hit them during the process. So she gets to turn this into an entire training session now on doing that, rather than necessarily, okay fine, I'm just going to dash in or I'm just going to jump. She will instead be able to work on the concept of, okay, I shouldn't do this way. How do I deal with it otherwise? Because to do this sort of walking while still being in the mental state to counter other things your opponent could do, patsu, jump, throwing fireballs at perfect timing, can be hard. Hard to the point where instinctively you end up not doing it. You end up pushing your way out of the situation. Your mind does not want to have to keep this up for the entire time. So you hit something. But this is perfect for her in terms of gauging how well she is doing with it. And she can furthermore use Karin's options to save herself from her own reactions? Reactions probably not the word.
You lose.
That means that that match was more or less a good barometer for, in my current mental state, how well can I actually do this thing? What can I improve about the way I do this? What needs to change either in my mental state or my actions to make this more possible? It's usually at this point that someone takes the breather, they go to character select and they just don't do anything for a little bit. Even if you're playing casuals at a local tournament, if you've decided, okay, I'm working on this thing with my casuals partner and I'm not doing well at it, let me catch my breath. But online does not allow you this luxury, so you just go through the match anyway, and especially if you're in a 2 of 3 lounge, then you get your breathing room. It's a good thing to do, actually, when you're in that state, to make the 2 of 3, just so that you get that breathing room, because if you've made yourself lose, just lose properly, and then rethink what happened. There, for example, we got the anti-air. But that is again the strength of Sakura. Karin basically is not sure she can anti-air Sakura at any time. In any form, really. You have to know a ton of different anti-airs to get this done. Something she already has issues with, but most of the time for Karin it's more so, can I do this anti-air or not? Whereas Sakura makes it into a timing question. So does Sagat, for that matter, but, you know. And there you can tell another point of stress. Despite having trained against Sakura for quite a lot of time, always remember that just because, oh yes, I've trained a lot, does not mean that when you are stressed, you're going to punish Sakura's uppercuts correctly.
You win.
One might not be able to do it in the match, but you can always remember moments like this and re-watch the third match or similar and go, did my opponent make more mistakes or did I improve something? This particularly comes up if you played and didn't feel as if it was all that different. You didn't necessarily feel, I didn't play much better, my mindset didn't change. Why did I win? Always ask yourself why you won. Because asking yourself why you lost is usually a much shorter answer. If you were losing, didn't feel as if you changed anything, but then won, check and see if you won because you subconsciously changed something, or won because your opponent just made more mistakes. Because chances are, if you face that same opponent again, and they only lost because they made more mistakes, if they're serious or even semi-serious about this game, you can expect to start losing again quite soon.
Round 1. Fight!
Alex has a similar issue with a different solution for Karin. She can use charged Mayoken against a very footsie-ish Alex still. For many reasons. It's not even easy to explain them. But as we're watching a Karin, she will find her way and she will show us why you can do it, and then maybe I'll be able to explain it from there. If she's in the correct mindset, and the Alex player is not in their own defensive mindset, they want to hit buttons, they want to keep you out, they want to play footsies at some level, Charged Mayoken becomes a very powerful skill. Because again, as with all aims, it's changing the way Alex has to think about the game, the way Alex wants to play. But we're back to the same thing. Even if I mentioned Charged Mayoken works really well, this is only really helpful if you have the other side of the plan. Fortunately, we already see some of that showing up just in instincts. Another strong aspect of being such a natural at a character is that sometimes your mind just knows the other half of the plan. You don't actually have to think about it, you don't have to have a whole setup. It depends on the opposing character, but you know, it's definitely in there. We're seeing more, I'm approaching while you're stressed out and defensive, and throwing or pushing you or similar. I'm looking for openings that are happening because you're waiting for me to hit this Mayoken. And so the situation improves. Ah, we finally see some move that. Does that mean that things are going to change? Who knows? Probably miss execution on Orochi, but we're still getting something out of this for sure. At the moment, it's additionally helpful that between the stand heavy kick, which was the other half of the plan basically, and the Mayoken itself, it's really easy to get V-meter. And that has all sorts of uses. You can use it either to go on offense more, or to control Alex better in the corner, using your V reversal. Up to you entirely. As Alex is not really a character who gets to do things to go over your head while just coming in from a jump, it turns out a little bit easier for you. That was quick. Almost laggy quick. Huh. I was not expecting her to survive that. Note the little delay and everything. The delay is there because you actually can't do that out of Orochi, but it still works if you're expecting your opponent. So that was a whole setup. Max range Orochi. Slightly delayed. Parry. But all of that is matter of crafting the mental state of your opponent first.
Fight!
So we're back to how to move around in this scenario. If Alex does not counter-charge Mayoken, it is a free approach. Alex can absolutely counter-charge Mayoken, but footsies Alex is less likely to do so. And to do it, you have to stop being footsies Alex. Especially if Karin's spacing is too good. So this is absolutely a case where you know because of the naturalized flow of the player that you can just tell them the middle part. Okay, you were missing this button, it will put you back on track to do the thing you normally do. Go for it. That's all I needed to tell you in between rounds or whatever.
Round 2.
It's important for the player to be able to trust themselves though, and to recognize when the opponent is good enough to just have a counter to it in the first place, and it be not working because you then have another thing you have to counter. This is hard. This is really hard. Alice's counter to this is actually just a backdash. He just backdashes after the Mayokin. Karin can chase him, but it takes a large commitment and a lot of meter to not commit so hard. So it's not really the best option. This gives up the space and gets rid of his charge, but depending on his situation, he wasn't going to get away anyway, more or less. He didn't get an option out of this. He either was going to get hit, was going to neutral jump and not get countered, because, you know, neutral jump is not exactly the hardest thing to see coming. In fact, Karin players should, after charge Mayokin, if they have a full intention, either not be hit by any of Alice's jump buttons, or be able to dash under or back dash away from them without too much danger after the charge Mayokin instantly jumping thing. Looks like our Sakura has headed out, and our lounge is one more open space. So if you want to fight a good footsies Alex, or Kanzuki Dynasty yourself, you can probably look for said good footsies Alex. Reverie, but with a lot of numbers. But basically reached the end of things to say about this matchup. So unless someone else joins this pretty soon, we're gonna probably be ending the stream here.
Okay, let's rumble.
Round 1.
Because of where we ended up at the end. Do remember that if you want to play against team members, you can actually look for Reverie to join this lounge, or at least for the time being until they get tired of it. And even if they do, it'll probably be Rune Siren with the lounge open for at least a bit longer, or maybe a different one, but it'll still be under her name. Look for 3 rounds first to 2. I can't tell you whether it will be character select on or off. This one is character select off, so you can search for what you're used to from us. Just with less people. Normally we tell you that this is US East Coast or the Atlantic Rim in terms of expecting to have a really good connection, but I don't know where Reverie is, so matches haven't been too bad. I'd expect somewhere in either Midwest or Florida-ish, given the fact that the ping was not so great. But, you know, give it a look yourself if you plan to join.
Fight.
Looks like you could use more training.
Final round. Fight.
Any information I have is that the Wolf's side is also probably closing up. Although I'm not sure if the lounge is closing, I should assume that it is. If you want to find the team members floating around for the next 30 minutes to an hour of their own training, you know how we are. You know who we are. And if you don't, then it probably doesn't matter. During this pandemic, please stay safe, whatever that means to you. We're not here to make value judgments about what is safe for people, but safe is strongly preferred. Ooh, the jump. And the counter dash. But the bat jump chase beats both of the main options Alex could have taken there, so...
You win.
Due to all the logistics we have running around, and normal stream stations, other people moving around relative to other things, lockdowns, etc., we haven't always had our streams or lounges other than this one. This is generally the one you can count on. We'll have done anything needed to be done over the weekend, probably. But I would definitely say for this week, therefore, don't count on streams. You can check our Twitter _MK_FGC at obviously around stream time to figure out if we are streaming, but I will remind you of what games we are normally streaming if we end up streaming them. Tomorrow would almost certainly be Unist. It's unlikely to be Guilty Gear, despite the fact that the Guilty Gear Strive demo is supposedly going to be out. We're not sure how we're dealing with that either, which is another reason why the streams might not be so normal by most of the standards, but we do have players in the beta. We weren't all able to go to Frosty and get in that way, but we did get other people in. So you might get to see some Strive gameplay and probably hear a ton of my opinions. Has happened and they're likely to be at this stage. But you're gonna get them, so look out for that somehow this week. On Thursday we tend to have DOA. Again, not entirely sure. Things have been weird. We might get him. It might be coincidental with timings for Guilty Gear and it'll be overridden. But if we just have a lounge on Thursday, expect it to be DOA, or we might have Guilty Gear content. On Friday, we often have misguidance related things. We have been having a lot of trouble getting our bot out because of stuff continually coming up on weekends. But those of you in this with all of us, and that would basically be everyone unless you're in Madagascar, you probably know that you're either doing nothing or responding to something in your environment that has caused you to have to do a lot of things. And weekends are no longer a respecter of persons, so I can't tell you that we will have Helena bot out this week. I said that last week and it didn't happen, so who knows. But this brings us to the end of this stream. Please check things out at 2-mk.org if you need bots or any information about them, and our YouTube channel for all of our past content, which is basically a ton of it now. We, however, are off for the night, but not necessarily off of Street Fighter V, so if you want to get in some matches with 2MK, look around. This has been Urien along with Kanzuki Dynasty. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Enjoy your training. That's probably the main thing that matters for you here. Good night, everyone.